Thank you very much for staying tuned to Independent Television, Abuja. Like I said, when we opened studio at 7, I did inform us that there will be a series of discussions we'll be having in our discussion segment. Now, the first one is we are going into the realm of elections. I don't want to say politics, because the person I have with me is not a politician, but she's an election expert. She's one of the Ogbonge, juggernauts in the civil society realm, one of the leading lights of OPDs. If you don't know what OPD is, OPD is Organization of Persons with Disabilities. And I told us when we opened studio that election in Osun State is barely some 10 days now. Yes. In another 10 days, it will be governorship election in Osun State, while it's some 7 months to the 2023 general elections. So I've decided that we need to look at the persons, the community of persons with disabilities. How is INEC, preparing for them, and how are they also preparing to be part of the electoral process? So I've practically dragged one of the leading lights of the OPD community. She's a lawyer, she's a farmer, she's a musician, she's everything put together. It's a great honor and privilege to have what is that fellowship you won in US? Washington Fellowship. Yes, to have it in this lady has met Barack Obama, the number one president in the world at some point in time. Well, it's a pleasure and honor to have Grace Jerry join us this morning. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Thanks for making it. I was a little jittery when you said you were out of town, but you will be back yesterday. I said, I hope I can have Jerry in the studio this time around. Yeah, it's not your first time on the show, but it's your first time in the studio because the first time we had to do the recording in your office. So, without wasting time, tell the viewers about yourself. Who exactly is Grace Jerry?
You have just said it all.
No,
you have overhyped me. I'm even afraid.
Let people know who Grace Jerry is. Actually.
Okay, so Grace Jerry is a disability rights, human rights advocate, spokesperson for over 35 million Nigerians living with various forms of disability. I am the Executive Director of Inclusive Friends Association, IFA, an organization that promotes inclusion, that promotes access for persons with disabilities in the area of democracy, governance, gender, health, education, anything related to how persons with disabilities can lead a normal and an active life in the society. That is what we promote in the Inclusive Friends Association. And Jide has said the rest. I'm a farmer, I'm a recording artist, a Mandela Washington Fellow.
Okay, and a lawyer on top.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about electoral 2022.
Yes.
What's your overview of that electoral act?
Okay, so for us, speaking for the disability community, I think Section 56 of the Electoral Act, as amended 2010, was one of the clauses, one of the provisions that we wanted to really address, because that provision, the provision of that, that section doesn't really mandate INEC to make reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities in terms of making election more accessible, making election more inclusive for the disability community. There is a word there that it says may, INEC may make provision. And when you see the word may, it's like it's not mandatory upon us to make this provision. So we kept pushing to change that particular section amongst other provisions, but most especially that section 56. And in 2022, we saw the amendment of that section. Currently, it's now Section 54, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act as amended 2022. And it was an exciting day for every one of us because I knew how much the PWD communities, I know how much we were at the forefront, a joint effort by civil society organization to ensure that all of the provisions were met. And for us, that section changed the word from may to shall. In other words, mandating INEC to make provisions, reasonable provisions of assistive materials and ensuring that the whole electoral process is accessible and inclusive of persons with disabilities.
Very interesting. Now, there's also a Section 9 sub 2 of the Electoral 2022, which says that INEC will have disaggregated data for on the register in the database.
Yeah.
So, does that also was an icing on the cake, that the issue of the INEC saying, oh, we do not have data of who has disability or not, that has also put that to rest now, because now they have to have that disaggregated.
And interestingly, even before the amendment was assented to by the president, Inclusive Friend has worked very closely with INEC over so many years now to ensure that election has been very accessible for persons with disabilities. And before, in 2020-2021, Inclusive Friends embarked on a data gathering project which we titled Data for Inclusion, coming up with a checklist that provides for disaggregated data of persons with disabilities, their types of disabilities, and we did that exercise purposely to provide that data for INEC, because we needed to just move ahead and make sure that INEC's voter register is updated with this disaggregated data for persons with disabilities. And I remember we worked even closely with the INEC while we were designing the checklist to make sure that every question or every data that would be usable for them would be captured in it. We worked with the ICT department, we worked with the operations, and we came up with an accurate checklist that we used, and we were able to gather data in 12 states within the country. And INEC has since used that data to update their voter register. And it didn't just stop there. While they were redesigning the portal for the CVR exercise that is ongoing, before they would call up for the flag off of the CVR, we also worked closely with them to update that part of the portal too that makes provision for persons with disabilities. Also making sure that we put those questions that address issues of disaggregated data for persons with disabilities. And where we were even called upon to vet it to make sure that everything is accurate. And since then till date, I can assure you that persons with disabilities who have had the opportunity to carry out the online registration have been updating their status with their type of disabilities and and all of the necessary information. So I would say that clause has really been addressed because it would help INEC to deploy assistive materials in terms of numbers to produce, to procure, and where to deploy to during the election.
Okay. Today is not for the history of why you set up Inclusive Friends. We know you've been doing great things. You won an award, a global award. I think your organization came toward.
Yes.
Was it 2-3 years ago?
That was in...
but
3 years ago. Yes, the Now Us Award.
What did you do to merit that award?
Okay, so it was a call for new innovations. Organizations who have been able to come up with new innovations to address challenges of either the most vulnerable community, which of course comes up with the youth, women, children, persons with disabilities, and all of that. And when we saw the call, shortly before the call came, IFA just came up with the Braille Ballot Guide for the visually impaired community. The Braille Ballot Guide is a jacket that would enable the blind voters to vote unaided on election day. It's a jacket where they would insert the ballot paper, the regular ballot paper. They will insert it into a folder that is Braille embossed with every political party. So what that does is that any visually impaired, any blind person that can read Braille would be able to insert their ballot paper into it and use their fingers to trace the political party of their choice. What that sought to address is making sure that blind voters would vote and experiencing the secret ballot process. They wouldn't have to rely on somebody to hold their hands to thumbprint on the ballot paper. So any blind person who could read Braille would be able to vote unassisted. And that was the Braille jackets that we came up with at the Inclusive Friends, with, of course, help of other very strategic partners, the NAVID, that's Mr. Melody Omosa, and Inclusive Friends. Yeah, so we presented that to INEC, and interestingly, INEC endorsed it almost immediately. And we saw the flag of, or the piloting of the Braille ballot jacket in Osun 2018 off-circle election in Osun.
Just 4 years ago.
Yes.
And so you are a pace setter.
Exactly. So it was the first time in the history of Nigeria that that device would be used, and it's been deployed in every election since then. The general election in 2019, all of the off-circle election, and currently Osun in few days is going to be deployed. So that was the device that we put in as our new innovation for the Now Us Award by Voice Oxfam. Yeah. So we put it in, and interestingly, our innovation was selected out of over 491 applications that went in from Africa and from Asia. IFA came third in all of this, and we won an award in The Hague, in Netherlands. We were there with the team to, of course, do the competing and all of that. But interestingly, we came third out of over 419 or 491 applications that came in. And for us, it's just so, it gladdened us so much that the world has recognized the fact that people have gone out of their way to come up with an innovation that would serve the community. And more so, the joy that innovation gave us is the fact that persons with visual impairment, those who are blind, could say that for the first time, they were able to vote independently. And it gave them so much joy. The fact that they didn't have to rely on somebody to help, but they were able to do it themselves.
Okay. Let's look at the just concluded Akat election.
Yes.
That was the first election where electoral 2022 was being tested. Yeah. More like a litmus test.
Exactly.
What you deployed to Ekiti on June 18.
Yeah.
What were your experiences?
Okay. First, I'm going to commend the INEC, the Independent Electoral Commission. The fact that they have tirelessly worked with the community of persons with disabilities to ensure that every provision is made, every challenge is being addressed. And we have sustained that partnership, we have sustained that friendship over time with INEC. And before Ekiti election, I remember we had an INEC PWD stakeholders meeting. Besides the general civil society stakeholders meeting, they also called an PWD INEC meeting, and it's just to make sure that we address every gap that might be experienced. And we looked at the Braille ballot, we looked at the election day written instruction. That's from EC30 EPWD. It's a poster that helps those who are deaf to be able to understand the procedures from accreditation all the way to casting their ballot. Where there is no sign language interpreter at the polling unit, the poster gives them direction on what to do. We were looking at the provision of the Braille, the magnifying glasses, and the Form EC40H that will capture on the spot data of persons with disabilities who came to vote on the day of election. So these were the things that we were addressing. And we also looked at coming from the data that we gathered of disaggregated data of persons with disabilities, and from the data they have collected from the CVR process, to know where to deploy these materials to. So those were the things that we looked at. We looked at the Braille ballot guide that they were going to deploy to Akat Election, to vet it, to make sure that it was accurate, well embossed. So these were the things that we checked with INEC, and deployment was made to all of the polling units that they have the data for persons with disabilities. So unlike previous election where for lack of data they deployed to almost every polling unit, this election in Ekiti they made sure they deployed to where they had the data.
So it's more like customized. This Ekiti election, the deployment was customized only to those
the data they had.
The data.
Yes, the data, yes.
There are 5 persons with albinism in this polling unit, so you deploy a magnifying glass. There are people with
deployed
Braille ballot guide.
Exactly. So it was deployed to specific polling units where they had the data. And I think that is what the data has done for INEC. The fact that they would not have to procure and deploy to everywhere needlessly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, even I remember very well during the 2019 election, where they deployed a Braille ballot guide to almost every polling unit. Visually impaired went to some polling units, and they still didn't find the Braille ballot guide. So that's why we cannot overemphasize the importance of having a disaggregated data. And we are glad that INEC already is beginning to take the right path in ensuring they gather that data. Already we have provided for 12 states. The CVR is already providing for, nationally. And of course, we still seek to provide for more. So we continue to just, more like playing a complementary role to what INEC is already doing. Yeah. Okay.
Again, let's explore a bit of your relationship with the Independent National Electoral Commission. And when I say your, I'm not particularly talking about IFA, but OPDs, Organization of Persons with Disabilities. How receptive has INEC been? I know for a fact that INEC has a department of gender and inclusivity. Gender and inclusivity. And then there is a committee on OPC, that's outreach and partnership committee. That was previously chaired by Dr. Adekunle Ogumola.
Yes.
So how receptive and what kind of partnership currently exists between IFA and the general OPD community and then INEC, the interface, how regular it is, your interface with the gender and inclusivity department, what is the form and shape?
Okay, so if gender and inclusivity department is more like the, I don't know what word to use now, is it liaison? Like our link to
the commission.
Yes, to the commission. So whatever we do with the gender and inclusivity department, we do with the outreach and partnership committee, to the general, INEC, and to the various departments that are responsible for one thing or the other. So I would say that it has been a very, very benefiting relationship that we have had with these departments within the commission. And because these are people that we have worked with over time, even before the gender and inclusivity department was set up, it was VEP. Yes, and we worked with them. Very strategic, Madam Bello Lacunya, and then Mr. Saze Uzi before he retired. Ms. Benny, Good News, Mr. Bassi, all of them have played very strategic role, and of course now Madam Blessing Obidiegu. So these are people who have worked really closely with the disability community. So it's a relationship that has spanned across so many years, so many elections. So even now with the new Electoral Act, it's just a continuation of the relationship that they have sustained with the OPDs, organizations of persons with disabilities, over time. So I would say that it has been a very, very benefiting relationship, because this is a commission that has really, really given priority to listening and working closely with organizations of people with disabilities. And you asked a question about IFA and other OPDs. What we came up with strategically in the Inclusive Friends was the Access Nigeria campaign. Access Nigeria campaign, the Disability Votes Matter campaign, we didn't want it to be just an IFA thing. We wanted the disability community and other OPDs to own the project. And what it simply says is disability votes matter. So if you might be working in another organization, but overall goal is to create access, electoral participation, increase electoral participation for people with disabilities. So the Access Nigeria campaign have allies from various organizations of persons with disabilities, JONAPID, within the 774 local government settings, statewide, nationally. Organizations of people with disabilities are part of the Access Nigeria campaign. Civil society organizations are part of it. You've been a huge resource person with the Access Nigeria campaign. And even INEC, we have allies within the INEC who have also embraced the cause of the Access Nigeria campaign. And all of this seeks to increase participation of persons with disabilities in the electoral process. So who would not want to own a project, a campaign like this?
That's very interesting to note, Grace. But let's also explore, what's your take on the Disability Act, National Disability Act? For 18 years, the OPDs were... I came into this struggle knowing that there were veterans who have been pushing
exactly for the national for us to have a law.
So it eventually came in 2018 or 2018, and then the president signed, and it was jubilation all over. And then the president has set up the National Commission for Persons with Disability, headed by His Excellency James Lalu. So what? Let's look at the act first before we look at the commission. The National Disability Act. What's your take on it?
Okay, so the National Disability Act, in as much as it still has a bit of gaps and will still call for amendments in the nearest future, like you said, for us it was a jubilation for the disability community, because for over 18 years I came into this struggle knowing that people have been fighting for the cause of the Disability Act. So when I came in, I joined the fight too.
You were the
barricade. I added my voice, to the whole
CCG,
process.
With JONAPID, with
Madam Ekaite, and all of them,
so many of them.
So these were people who have fought for the process of this act. And like I said, I came in and I also joined in the struggle. And I remember clearly that what we did strategically was that we just took some provisions of the act and we just started pushing it on our own to see that we would not have to wait until it becomes a law, but we begin to push for implementation of the provisions before it will eventually be signed by the president. And in 2019, in January, I think it was in January.
Yeah, January 23.
Yes, we woke up
and
the president
January 23, 2019.
Yes,
I remember that very vividly.
No, it was like a Christmas day for the
It was a red letter day for the persons. And some of us who are your allies
wished we were there with him while he was signing.
Just like the Not Too Young to Run.
Exactly, like we were lined up with him while he was signing to cheer on national TV. But overall, we are glad that we have a law, a disability law. America are celebrating well over how many years of over 30 years, 35, almost 35 years of having a law. We are currently boasting of like 3 years, but right now we have a law. And like I said, even if it's still not, because it doesn't really capture the issues of gender as it should in terms of women, and some other clauses that are still missing and things that we wish was in it. One thing I tell the disability community is that right now we have a law. We can always amend. Right now we are pushing for the implementation of the provision of the Disability Act, and that is the discourse on the front burner discourse right now on every organization and the lips of the people with disabilities, because we want to see that there is employment opportunity
5%.
For persons with disabilities. 5% employment opportunity. Every MDA should make that provision. Even the private sector should see to it that they capture the provisions of this act to make employment opportunity. We are seeing to ensuring that there's accessible transportation, healthcare, education for persons with disabilities,
even
political
buildings.
participation. Yes, and public buildings should be made accessible for persons with disabilities. So these are the things we are pushing for the implementation. People shouldn't wait until the 5 years, gap that was
which
provided.
is almost out.
Is almost there.
Because 2019, January 23, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022.
Yeah.
By next year, we
penalties
should be
attached.
Yes.
And
okay, now that's the desirability that it should be amended. But let's see the implementation. So the OPDs and the National Commission for Persons with Disability.
Yeah.
What kind of interface do you have with that commission?
Okay, so I think it was a year after the law was assented to by the president that the commission was set up. And I remember clearly that the cry of the community of disability was, okay, set up a commission that is saddled with, ensuring, more like mandated with ensuring the implementation of the Disability Act. So these are the people that would make sure that they keep checking, they keep engaging, they keep interfacing, with all the relevant government. And I appreciate the civil society organization too, because we have also played a very close relationship. And there's something I always talk about. It's important that we play complementary role to the government, to every agency, to every department, because if we want to see them implement provisions that accommodate us, we also need to support them.
True. Because
they may not have the broader knowledge on what to do for the community. So it's important that you build a relationship, you work closely with them. And for the Commission of Persons with Disabilities that is headed by the Executive Secretary, James Lalu has vast experience when it comes to disability issues. He headed the Plateau State Disability Commission, so he came in with wealth of experiences. And interestingly, he is a man that understands partnership, that understands collaboration, that takes very seriously, relationship with civil society organizations and even OPDs. And I know that he has pushed at various fronts to ensure that organizations and even agencies begin to prioritize issues of persons with disabilities. And I know that from time to time they call for engagement with OPDs. From time to time, OPDs call them, to interface, to hold, strategic roundtable meetings to make sure that we are working, we are collaborating. So we are not working independently, but we are also working closely. We are also working together for the benefit of over 35 million persons with disabilities in Nigeria.
That's very huge. So let's come back to election. Osun. No, before we go to Osun, what are the low points of your observation, the low points and the high point of your observation in Ekiti on June 18, 2022?
Okay. So
that when because I read somewhere, part of your communique was that there should be, which in fact, I just saw that, was it yesterday or early this morning, that you are calling for the establishment of, what's it called now? Those who will prosecute vote traders.
Vote buying.
That they should, these people that do the immediate trial of those who are caught engaging in vote buying. That's when you set up mobile court. That I read that IFA was calling for deployment of mobile courts to deal with issue of vote buyer and seller, so that the whole process is shortened. But that is just one thing I picked from your report on Ekiti. But what are those things that you saw as improvement for community of persons with disability in Ekiti? And what are those things that you think needs to be improved upon in the light of the forthcoming Osun?
Yeah. Okay, so I think we took our, we more like did a what's this word now?
Comparative
analysis, yes, of Anambra. Just concluded Anambra and Ekiti. We saw a lot of things that didn't quite go right in Anambra, especially the beavers machine that in some polling units and the glitches that was experienced, and how persons with disabilities, after waiting for the glitch with the beavers to be addressed, most of them had to go back home and didn't have to vote. I think while we were in Anambra observing the election, we were just driving into a polling unit. That was almost 1 p.m. And we saw an elderly woman with disability walking home. And I just stopped to ask how was the experience for her. And she said she's been here since morning. She has not voted. Beavers was not working. Eventually, when it started working, they didn't give her priority anymore. So she stood in line for hours. And because she was on crutches, she had to start going back. We had to turn her back. And, you know, we began to get experiences. I mean, hear from other persons with disabilities who said because of that glitch, eventually when it was sorted out, they weren't giving them priority voting anymore. Because ideally, everybody were already tired.
Yeah, tired.
So people were feeling like, if you've been here, I've been here since morning. So priority voting was no longer being observed. So those were the things that we sought to address in Ekiti. And in Ekiti, we saw that beavers worked way better than what happened in Anambra. And priority to an extent was given. And there were still some polling units and some of these INEC officials that didn't quite understand priority yet. So you would see that persons, especially those who were deaf, said they had this experience of not being believed that they were persons with disabilities. Yeah. It's like you're just keeping quiet and signing with your hands.
You know, somebody said
it wasn't easy for them
disability is visible.
It's visible, exactly. You know, but I mean,
look at those of us who have to wear glasses to see anything.
No, you're one of us now. Because you have to rely on.
Yeah, we have to rely on.
The glass is an aid.
Yes, it's an assistive device for us.
So these were the things that we saw. It was a better improvement from Anambra, what we saw in Ekiti. But of course, it still has its own. We will still notice gaps here and there. We noticed that the deployment of magnifying glasses was not so. It wasn't so well done. From the observations that we gathered from the...
How many people did you deploy?
Okay, so what we did was a stationary observation. Okay. So we just had people strategically placed at the 16 local governments. Okay. But we relied also heavily on Yaiga Africa's watching the votes.
Does Yaiga Africa has questions?
Yes, they have incorporated. Yes, they have incorporated our questions into their checklist. So that gives us an opportunity,
which is also a partnership between OPD and the other civil society.
Exactly, it's a partnership between IFA and Yaiga Africa, because they make sure they gather this data for us to also add to the data that we. Of course, we do not have that much fund to deploy. Although in Anambra we deployed over 200 observers, but it's not for every election that we have the funds to deploy in large number, massively. Yeah. In Anambra, we deployed over 200 persons with disability observers, but in Osun, we had stationary observation. In Ekiti. And we're also doing same in Osun. Okay. Also stationary observation in the 30 local. Yes, 31 local governments. So it's up, but also we're going to be relying, because our Yaiga already has our questions incorporated into their checklist. So we would also gather that data. But I would say that in terms of provision of the assistive material, I knew that INEC made sure they deployed to those POs that they had the data for. It was just the magnifying glasses that we didn't quite see at some of those polling units that was deployed. And we still have a challenge of accessibility, physical accessibility for people on wheelchairs, people, in fact, generally for all persons with disabilities. The abrupt floor level changes, the placement of the voting, setup of the voting points where some of them still set up on the veranda of schools where it was high. People who are on wheelchairs or those on crutches would have to be helped to climb up on that veranda. So we still saw a little of that, while some of the PU were set up in flat surfaces. Some still set up on verandas that still was inaccessible for persons with disabilities. So we are looking forward to an improvement of all of this in Osun, because immediately after that we put together a report and we shared with INEC to let them know that these were the areas that you should sustain, and these are the areas that should be addressed, should be changed moving forward.
So okay, because of time, let's look at your preparation for Osun in the next 10 days. What is IFA and wider OPD? What are your prep for Osun in the coming 10 days?
So the Access Nigeria campaign has we deployed a new strategy of holding town halls and outreach to special schools within the states. And the reason we took that route is because we have schools for persons with disabilities who have attained the voting age. Some of them even have their PVC but have never voted. So we carried out sensitization in those special schools, first to ensure that those who are voting age understand their right to vote, and those who do not have their PVC would begin to make efforts to get registered to ensure that they also exercise their franchise. So that was what the outreach saw. And then the town hall we held with leaders from within the 16 LGAs in the Ekiti and the 31 LGAs within Osun. We brought them together, so it was like a coming up with mobilization strategy on how we can ensure a mass turnout of persons with disabilities. You guys are the ones with direct contact with them. So we came up with strategies on how you can now go back to your LGA and mobilize a mass turnout. So those were the things that we did, and we have seen how massively this has worked, because the LGA coordinators we brought together, we designed the strategies together with them, so they know the terrain, they understand the people, they know what to do. They came up with ideas on how, and we saw a mass turnout for Ekiti. And same we did with Osun. We took a trip to Osun ahead of the election. We visited about 6 special schools for persons with disabilities. And interestingly, even within the disability community, there are those who are still marginalized. And that was what we saw when we carried out this outreach within those special schools. Because the testimony that kept coming from them was the fact that nobody has ever taken out time to come talk to them about election. These are young adults. These are those who are well into their early 20s but have never really voted. So that nobody has really taken time out to come talk to them about election, like Access Nigeria IFA did. So we're going to see young adults who already have their PVCs voting in this election in Osun. And that for us is huge. And towards 2023 election, we're going to see those young adults with disabilities who are going to make sure they get their PVCs to vote, because now they understand what it means and it is their
So
right.
we need to go on a short break now to pay some bills. We'll be back, and then we'll look at the preparation towards 2023. Stay tuned. Thank you very much. Welcome back from the short commercial break. So, Grace Jerry, 2023 is 7 months down the line.
Yeah.
What is the OPDs and more specifically IFA? What are your plans towards the 2020? Because continuous voter registration is on now. I don't know what effort you are making to get people of your community to register to vote, and what other plans do you have for 2023 as we round up?
Okay, so Sylvia, we have come up with a couple of activities to see how we can utilize the remaining few days for the process to be closed. And we are taking, in collaboration with INEC, we want to take the CVR closely to where these persons with disabilities are. We have mapped the communities where they are. We have mapped also special schools. That has been the new strategy we have adopted. Special schools, so that the students are also registering, and then persons with disabilities around the communities, around the school, would also come out. So it's you taking CVR. Of course, we understood that most of them could not go as far as travel to the INEC,
local government
offices, to do that. Some didn't have the transport, of course, a life of a person with disability. They couldn't do all of that. So this time around, collaborating with INEC to take it closely to them, that is the strategy we're putting ahead right now. And to also continue with a mass mobilization from the community. If it means us providing transportation system, if it means that, individuals come in and push and help persons with disabilities to get registered, those are the things we're looking at to utilize the remaining few days left, so that the numbers will increase as to persons with disabilities who either would want to transfer, or would want to renew, or would want to, they have a fresh registration. Another thing we're also pushing for is the need to have an accurate data. How much data has INEC gathered? Because it's important. This is a general election coming. It's important that when you are talking about procuring assistive devices, you procure nationwide. So it's important to have a data of persons with disabilities nationally, and to have the disaggregated data to know where to deploy to, so that nobody is left behind in terms of the provision of these assistive devices. And another new innovation that we came up with is the assistive voting cubicle that will aid persons on wheelchair or those on the roller skates to be able to place their ballot paper and thumbprint effectively. And INEC has already assured us that they were going to make sure they deploy this assistive voting cubicle for the 2023 general election. So for us, generally, it's going to be, we will continue with our town halls and our outreach to mobilize a mass turnout. We will also continue with our engagement with INEC and every key electoral stakeholder to make sure that the accurate provisions are made for the community of persons with disabilities. And overall, I think it's just to ensure that we continue to make them understand their rights to come out and vote, and not to sit back, at home. We want to, while we promote increased participation, we want to measure those numbers at the polling unit. We want to ensure that we have numbers, large numbers attached to the campaign that we are carrying out.
That would be the size of this first segment of Development Focus with Jide Ojo on ITV. I want to thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Barrister Grace Jerry.
I'm not a barrister. I'm not practicing.
Okay, you are not practicing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
it's only those who are practicing that are barrister. Okay, but you are attorney at law. So we want to thank you. Grace Jerry, I've been speaking with him in the last 45 minutes or thereabout on how to ensure the increased participation of persons with disability in the forthcoming Osun and the 2023 general election. Grace Jerry is the Executive Director, Inclusive Friends Association, one of the organizations of persons with disabilities that are doing wonder in Nigeria. I want to thank you once again.
Thank you, sir.
I hope when next we call on you, you will oblige us.
Yes.
So we'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll be talking about something else that I will tell you when we are back. Stay tuned.